Samuel, a 12-year-old boy with black hair and a Latino handsome face, was walking along the busy street in the early morning. The city was already alive with a stream of people rushing to their offices and shops, preparing to start the day. Cars honked impatiently as traffic jams built up, a typical morning scene in the bustling parts of New York. Samuel glanced around, his thoughts focused on one thing: finding food. He hadn't eaten in the last 24 hours, and the gnawing ache in his stomach was becoming unbearable. He had only $1 left in his pocket, a remnant of the $10 given to him by a kind stranger 2 days ago, along with a burger, potato chips, and bread. The food and money had sustained him for a while, but now, with just $1 to his name, Samuel was unsure of where his next meal would come from. Samuel's shirt, jacket, and trousers were shabby and unclean, a testament to the hardships he faced daily. He kept what little clothing he had left at a small apartment owned by a middle-aged man he referred to as Uncle Lopez. Though not related by blood, Lopez had taken Samuel in, offering him a place to stay. However, Lopez was often absent from the apartment, busy working in the supermarket he co-owned with his sister. His days started early, leaving for work in the morning and not returning until late at night. Samuel was used to being alone, fending for himself as best as he could. Samuel had no key to the apartment, so whenever he wanted to return, he would wait by the door for Lopez to come home. But Lopez's late hours often meant that Samuel was left waiting in vain. On many days, when Lopez didn't return, Samuel would simply find a spot on the floor, wherever seemed appropriate, and sleep there for the night. This had become a routine for him, a part of his life that he had reluctantly accepted. As Samuel walked along the busy street, he unexpectedly bumped into Jamie, his 24-year-old friend with an athletic build who worked at a community center. It had been weeks since they last saw each other, so Samuel took the opportunity to catch up. Jamie had always treated Samuel like a younger brother, often buying him food and giving him money. He admired Samuel's good character, knowing that even if Samuel went without food for days, he would never resort to stealing. While they were talking, Samuel heard a cry for help from a nearby lane. Without hesitation, both Samuel and Jamie ran towards the sound. They found a woman struggling with a man trying to snatch her handbag. Jamie bravely fought the man off and managed to retrieve the handbag, though the attacker escaped. The woman, although shaken, was unharmed despite the fact that the assailant had a knife. Jamie handed back her handbag, and she, still nervous, expressed her gratitude. After checking that nothing was missing from her handbag, the woman took out two $50 notes and offered one to each of them. Jamie, however, refused to take the money and handed his note to Samuel, telling him he needed it to buy food. Touched by their kindness, the woman asked for their names, and they exchanged cell phone numbers. Her name was Sarah. Sarah, a 23-year-old woman, was the daughter of a wealthy businessman known for his charitable work and generosity toward the poor and homeless in New York. A few days after the incident, she spoke with her father, Mr. Alfred Martinez, about how Samuel and Jamie had come to her rescue. Moved by their actions, Sarah called both Samuel and Jamie, offering them jobs working for her father. Mr. Martinez offered Jamie a position as his personal assistant and security guard, while Samuel was given the role of horsekeeper. In addition to the jobs, both Samuel and Jamie were provided with their own rooms at the Martinez mansion. Overjoyed by this unexpected opportunity, both Samuel and Jamie gladly accepted the offer. Upon arriving at Mr. Martinez's mansion, Samuel and Jamie were shown to their accommodations within the staff's quarters. Each of them was given a fully furnished room, sharing a bathroom and toilet between them. The rooms were cozy and nicely furnished, far beyond anything they had experienced before. Both Samuel and Jamie were overjoyed, feeling a sense of comfort and security in their new home. Since moving into the staff's quarters, Samuel found himself properly dressed for the first time in a long while. On their first day at the mansion, following her father's instructions, Sarah took both Samuel and Jamie to a nearby clothing store. As a token of appreciation, she bought them each 2 pairs of trousers and shirts. Jamie was assigned to work directly with Mr. Martinez, while Samuel was placed under Sarah's supervision, giving him a newfound sense of dignity and purpose. Under Sarah's supervision, Samuel was taught the best ways to care for and ride a horse. With months of training and experience, he became an accomplished horse rider. Over time, Samuel transformed into a neat, clean, and properly dressed young man, with his hair always well-groomed, reflecting the changes in his life and the care he was receiving. As Samuel began earning a good salary every month for his work, he was able to save money in his bank account, giving him the opportunity to plan for his future. This financial stability marked a significant change in his life, allowing him to think beyond just day-to-day survival. As time went by, Sarah and Samuel grew very close, with Sarah trusting Samuel enough to share her secrets. One day, in a quiet moment, Sarah asked Samuel, "Have you ever seen your mother?" Samuel looked thoughtful and replied, "The last time I saw my mother was when I was 10 years old. She died of brain cancer at the age of 35. Sarah gently touched his hand, offering comfort like a sister, and said, "I am sorry to hear that." Samuel continued, "After that, I ended up living on the street because I couldn't afford the rent for our apartment." Curious, Sarah asked, "What was your mother's name?" Samuel answered softly, "Elena Lopez." Sarah continued her questioning, "Do you know your father?" Samuel, with a hint of urgency in his voice, replied, "I don't know my father. I have never seen him. My mother raised me alone." In Sarah's mind, Samuel stood as a towering figure, shaped by life experiences that few kids had to endure. These hardships taught him, in a difficult way, to deeply value the sacrifices of a mother who raised her child alone, and to recognize the importance of a father's love and sacrifices. Sarah believed that a father's and mother's unconditional love for their children could not be substituted by any other kind of love, and she felt that people should realize and appreciate that profound truth. Mr. Alfred Martinez, a happily married man with 2 children, had always valued family. Sarah had a big brother, Jeremy, who was 3 years older than her and held the position of executive director at one of their father's companies. One day, during a regular workday, Mr. Martinez called Samuel into his office. With a serious expression, he asked, "Do you know your father?" Samuel, with a hint of sadness, replied, "No, I don't." Mr. Martinez pressed further, "What is your father's name?" Samuel answered, "Joel." Mr. Martinez asked again, "Joel what?" "His surname." Samuel, almost uncertain, responded, "Joel Martinez?" Samuel then took out his cell phone and showed Mr. Martinez a photo of his mother and father together. He explained, "They were never married. My mother told me that my father died in a tragic road accident just 2 months before I was born." As Mr. Martinez looked at the photo, tears welled up in his eyes. Overcome with emotion, he approached Samuel, embraced him, and said, "You are my nephew. Your father was my younger brother." Alfred Martinez found himself lost in thought, reflecting on the cherished memories he had with his younger brother, Joel. Despite the many hardships they faced, their bond was strong, forged in the fires of struggle and perseverance. They had grown up in a small, 1-bedroom apartment with their parents, who both worked long hours at a nearby 24-hour supermarket. The pay was meager, just enough to cover rent and put food on the table, but their family was content with what they had. Alfred and Joel had gone to school, though neither of them excelled academically. Still, they managed to complete middle school, and afterward, Alfred took a job at a pizza restaurant while Joel found work at a nearby Mexican restaurant. Those were difficult times, but the love and support they shared as brothers made those years some of the most precious in Alfred's memory. Both of Alfred and Joel's parents came from Mexico, sneaking into the U.S. when they were just 18 years old. After arriving, they managed to find jobs at a supermarket, where they worked long hours to make ends meet. A few years later, they got married, building a life together despite the challenges of being in a new country with limited opportunities. Alfred summoned Samuel to his office, a serious look on his face. "There is something I want to talk to you about," he began. "Do you want to continue schooling? I know you've missed 3 years, but we can help you catch up." Samuel hesitated, unsure. I like the idea of going to school, but I'm not sure how I could catch up, he admitted. Alfred smiled encouragingly. If you're still interested, we can find a school that will accommodate your situation and help you fit in. Samuel, feeling a spark of hope, answered, I would love to try. Samuel's first day at school was a heart-wrenching experience. Surrounded by classmates who were at least 2 years younger, he felt like an outcast, as if he were once again navigating a strange and unfamiliar world. He knew that fitting in and catching up on the years of missed education would be a daunting challenge. However, with his uncle's advice echoing in his mind, Samuel resolved to persevere. He focused intently in class, listening to the teachers with unwavering attention. As the weeks passed, Samuel began to make friends, despite the initial difficulties. His well-built physique, tall stature, and street smarts helped him gain acceptance among his classmates. To his surprise, he caught up with his studies brilliantly, driven by his diligence, seriousness, and full concentration. The challenges he faced only fueled his determination to succeed. During recess, while sitting in his classroom, Samuel's mind wandered back to a difficult time in his past. He vividly recalled a cold winter night when he was standing near the entrance of a supermarket, shivering and exhausted. He hadn't eaten in at least 12 hours, and the biting cold seemed to seep into his bones. His body ached. His empty stomach couldn't generate enough heat to keep him warm, and his legs and hands were trembling uncontrollably. Despite wearing a thick winter jacket and layers of shirts, the cold was relentless, and being outside for so long in such freezing weather was taking its toll. Samuel had nowhere to go. His friends were nowhere to be found, and he was alone. Despair clouded his mind, leaving him feeling hopeless and lost. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, a middle-aged man with a weathered face but a kind demeanor approached him. "Hello, boy. Why are you standing here? I saw you from inside the market, and you've been here for hours. What's your name?" the man asked. "My name is Samuel. I stand here because I have nowhere to go. I am alone. I have no home," Samuel replied, his voice filled with resignation. The man, full of empathy, responded, "You can call me Uncle Lopez. I'm going home now. Come with me. You can't stay here. It's too cold tonight. I have food at home. You can eat and take a shower." Without hesitation, Samuel followed Uncle Lopez to his home. The man was kind-hearted, living alone in a small, warm, and cozy apartment just a few blocks away from the supermarket. After taking a shower, Uncle Lopez provided Samuel with a clean towel and pajamas, while he washed Samuel's trousers and shirts. As they settled in, Uncle Lopez shared that his wife and son had tragically died in an accident in Mexico a year before he moved to America. Then Uncle Lopez looked into his refrigerator and took out 2 chicken breasts, along with some carrots, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, and started cooking a hearty soup. As the comforting aroma filled the small apartment, Uncle Lopez served Samuel the soup along with plenty of bread and butter. He also made a cup of hot coffee for Samuel. Samuel, famished, ate vigorously while Uncle Lopez watched him with a caring gaze. "You can come here and sleep any time you want," Uncle Lopez said, his voice filled with warmth. "But first, come meet me at the market, and we'll walk here together." He reiterated with a gentle smile, "If you're hungry, just come to me at the supermarket." His words were filled with empathy, offering Samuel a sense of security he hadn't felt in a long time. Due to his dedication to work and sharp mind, Jamie found contentment in his life. Beyond his role as a security guard and personal assistant, Jamie had also become a trusted confidant to Alfred. He helped manage Alfred's appointments, took care of business matters, and became adept at remembering the names of clients and peers, along with the details of their businesses. Jamie's trustworthy nature, discretion, and honesty made him a pillar of support for Alfred, someone Alfred could lean on with confidence. In order not to upset his uncle, Alfred Martinez, Samuel had been studying very hard, dedicating long hours to mastering the subjects he took: mathematics, physics, and chemistry. The weight of responsibility was heavy on his young shoulders, but it also fueled his determination. He knew how much Alfred had done for him, how much he believed in him, and Samuel was resolute in his efforts not to let his uncle down. Every evening, Samuel would sit at his desk in the small, cozy living quarters provided by Alfred. His books would be spread out in front of him, notes meticulously organized, pencils sharpened, and the air filled with the soft scratching sound as he worked through problem after problem. The formulas and equations were complex, but Samuel approached them with a fierce intensity, determined to conquer each one. Alfred, for his part, was deeply invested in Samuel's progress. He would often visit the living quarters, a gentle knock on the door before stepping in to see how Samuel was doing. "How's the studying coming along, Samuel?" he would ask, his voice filled with warmth and encouragement. Alfred knew the subjects Samuel was tackling were challenging, but he also knew that Samuel was capable. He believed in the boy's potential, and he made sure to express that belief every time they spoke. Samuel, though often tired from the relentless hours of study, would always offer a smile in return. "It's going well, Uncle," he would say, his voice steady but hiding the fatigue that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. Alfred would nod, offering words of encouragement, reminding Samuel of how far he had come and how much further he could go. It was these conversations that kept Samuel going, even on the hardest days when the equations seemed endless and theorems too complex. One evening, as Samuel sat at his desk, diligently working through his homework, his mind began to wander. The numbers and figures on the pages before him blurred, replaced by the haunting memories of his past, memories he could never forget. His thoughts drifted back to a time when life was not filled with textbooks and exams, but with pain and loss. It was during one of these moments of distraction that he found himself reliving the final days of his mother's life. Samuel was only 10 years old then, far too young to bear the weight of such a profound loss. His mother, Elena, had been a vibrant woman, full of life and love, but the cruel hand of fate had dealt her a devastating blow. She was diagnosed with brain cancer, a ruthless disease that had quickly spread, consuming her strength and spirit. The last time his mother had seen the doctor, the prognosis was grim. Samuel could still remember the cold, sterile room where the doctor had told them the devastating news. "She has only a few months left," the doctor had said, his voice devoid of hope. The cancer had spread too far, too deep into her brain. There was nothing more they could do. For Samuel, those final months were a blur of pain and helplessness. His mother could no longer speak. The disease had robbed her of her voice. All she could do was blink, her eyes filled with tears that never seemed to stop. It broke Samuel's heart to see her like that, to know that there was nothing he could do to help her. He would sit by her bedside, holding her hand, tears streaming down his face as he watched her slip further and further away from him. Two of Elena's close friends had tried to help as much as they could. They would come by the small apartment whenever they had time, bringing food and offering whatever comfort they could. But they were busy too, each with their own families and responsibilities. They couldn't be there all the time, and Samuel was often left alone to care for his mother. Those days were unbearably hard. There was no money for special treatment, and without insurance, there was no hope of getting the care his mother so desperately needed. The cancer, relentless and unforgiving, continued to spread, and Elena grew weaker with each passing day. Then, one night, the inevitable happened. Samuel had been sitting by his mother's side, just as he had done every night since she had fallen ill. Her breathing, which had been labored for days, grew fainter, each breath a struggle. Samuel held her hand, squeezing it gently, trying to offer some comfort even though he knew it was futile. As the night wore on, her breaths became shallower, until finally, they stopped altogether. Samuel sat there for hours, unable to comprehend that she was really gone, that the woman who had been his entire world was now just a lifeless body before him. He cried for what felt like an eternity, the tears flowing freely down his cheeks until there were no more left to shed. When he finally found the strength to move, he called his mother's close friends. They came immediately, their own faces etched with sorrow as they helped him arrange the funeral. After his mother's funeral, Samuel found himself completely alone in the world. He had no family, no home, and no means to support himself. The apartment, which had been their only refuge, was now too expensive for him to keep. With no other options, Samuel was forced onto the streets, homeless and adrift in a world that seemed impossibly cruel. Those were the darkest days of Samuel's life. He wandered the streets aimlessly, his stomach empty, his body weak from hunger and exhaustion. He had no idea where his next meal would come from, or where he would sleep each night. It was during these difficult times that he met Uncle Lopez and Jamie, two people who would change his life forever. Uncle Lopez had found him one cold winter night, standing outside a supermarket, shivering uncontrollably. Samuel had been too weak to move, his body aching from the cold and hunger that had become his constant companions. He had been standing there for hours, too tired and too hopeless to do anything else. But then, out of nowhere, Uncle Lopez had appeared, his weathered face full of concern. It had been the first time in what felt like forever that Samuel had felt safe, that he had felt cared for. Uncle Lopez had been a godsend, a beacon of hope in a world that had been nothing but darkness for so long. And it wasn't just Uncle Lopez who had helped him through those difficult times. Jamie, too, had been a friend when Samuel had needed one the most. Jamie was older than Samuel, but he had a kind heart and a willingness to help. He had met Samuel on the streets one day, and the two had quickly formed a bond. Jamie had been the one to introduce Samuel to the community center, where they provided assistance to jobless people, single mothers, and the homeless. It was a place where Samuel could go to get a meal, to find a warm place to stay, and most importantly, to find people who cared. With the help of Uncle Lopez and Jamie, Samuel had slowly started to rebuild his life. They had given him the support and the kindness that he had desperately needed, and in doing so, they had given him hope. It was a hope that had carried him through the darkest days, a hope that had eventually led him to where he was now, sitting in a warm room, surrounded by books and the promise of a brighter future. But even as Samuel sat there, surrounded by the comforts of his new life, the memories of his past were never far from his mind. They were a constant reminder of how far he had come, but also of the pain and loss that had brought him to this point. His mother's death, the months he had spent on the streets, the kindness of strangers who had become like family. These were the experiences that had shaped him, that had made him the person he was today. And so, as Samuel sat there in the quiet of the evening, his homework spread out before him, he allowed himself to remember. He allowed himself to feel the sadness, the pain, the grief that still lingered in the corners of his heart. But he also allowed himself to feel the gratitude, the hope, and the determination that had grown from those dark days. Samuel knew that he couldn't change the past, but he also knew that the future was his to shape. And with the support of his uncle, Alfred, and the memories of those who had helped him along the way, he was determined to make the most of it. He would study hard, he would work tirelessly, and he would honor the memory of his mother by building a life that she would have been proud of. The journey ahead was still long, and Samuel knew that there would be challenges to face, but he was ready. He had faced worse before, and he had come out stronger on the other side. Now, with the love and support of his new family, he was ready to face whatever the future held. It had been quite some time since Samuel last visited Uncle Lopez. The rigors of daily schooling, coupled with the relentless preparation for his upcoming examinations, had consumed almost every moment of his days and nights. Yet, as he progressed in his studies, the memories of his early struggles and the kindness shown to him by Uncle Lopez never strayed far from his thoughts. Samuel owed so much of his current stability and hope for the future to the man who had once taken him in on that cold, desperate night. One day, after realizing how long it had been since he last saw the man who had been a beacon of warmth and support in his darkest hours, Samuel decided it was time to make the journey. He knew he couldn't let more time slip by without visiting Uncle Lopez, who had undoubtedly played a crucial role in his life. The trip to the supermarket where Uncle Lopez worked wasn't too far, but with Samuel's packed schedule, it felt like a significant detour. As he approached the familiar location, his heart quickened with a mix of anticipation and guilt for not having visited sooner. Pushing open the heavy glass doors of the supermarket, he was immediately greeted by the cool, conditioned air, a stark contrast to the warm, bustling streets outside. Samuel walked slowly through the aisles, his head turning from side to side as he searched for the familiar figure. The supermarket was as lively as ever, with customers moving in and out, filling their carts with groceries. But for Samuel, the place held a special significance. It was where he had first met Uncle Lopez, and where he had often come to seek solace and sustenance during those difficult times on the streets. Finally, his eyes landed on Uncle Lopez, who was busy unloading fresh meat and vegetables onto the shelves. Even from a distance, the man's focused and methodical approach to his work was evident. Despite the years that had passed, he remained the same. A man who took pride in his job, however humble it may have been. With a smile spreading across his face, Samuel approached him. "Good afternoon, Uncle Lopez," Samuel called out warmly as he got closer. "How are you doing? It's been a long time." Uncle Lopez turned around, momentarily surprised by the voice that had called out to him. But his expression quickly shifted to one of pure joy when he saw Samuel. The years that had passed since they first met seemed to melt away in that moment. "Samuel!" he exclaimed, dropping the package of vegetables he was holding and opening his arms wide. Samuel stepped into the embrace, hugging him tightly. It felt as though they hadn't seen each other in years, even though it had only been a few months. After they broke the embrace, Samuel, still smiling, handed Uncle Lopez a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something," he said, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. "It's some homemade chocolate, specially made by one of the ladies at the house." Uncle Lopez's eyes lit up as he took the box, his smile broadening. "You remembered I love chocolate," he said with a grin, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thank you, Samuel. This means a lot to me." He examined the box for a moment before setting it aside carefully, making a mental note to enjoy it later, perhaps with a cup of coffee. Lopez glanced around at the work he still had to finish, but then he turned back to Samuel with a decision made. "Why don't we sit down for a bit?" he suggested, motioning toward a small coffee table tucked away in a corner of the supermarket, usually reserved for employees during their breaks. "I could use a break, and I want to hear all about what you've been up to." Samuel agreed, feeling a warmth spread through his chest at the thought of spending some quality time with the man who had done so much for him. They walked over to the table, and soon enough, Lopez returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee. The rich aroma filled the air as they sat down across from each other. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, each taking a sip of their coffee. Samuel took in the familiar surroundings, the hum of the supermarket's activity in the background, and the warmth of the coffee cup in his hands. It was a scene that brought back so many memories, but today it felt different, less about survival and more about connection. "So, tell me," Uncle Lopez began, breaking the silence, "how is school? I remember you were studying for some big exams last time we talked." Samuel nodded, feeling a swell of pride mixed with the weight of the effort he had put in. "It's been going well, Uncle. The subjects are tough, especially mathematics, physics, and chemistry, but I've been working hard. I'm determined to do well, not just for myself, but because I know how much you and Uncle Alfred believe in me." Lopez smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "I always knew you had it in you, Samuel. You're a bright young man, and with your dedication, there's no limit to what you can achieve." They continued to talk, the conversation flowing easily between them. They spoke about Samuel's studies, his life at Alfred's mansion, and the friends he had made at school. Samuel even shared some of his anxieties about the upcoming exams, admitting how the pressure sometimes got to him. But Lopez, ever the voice of reason and calm, reassured him that he was more than capable of handling it. As they talked and laughed, it became clear that the bond between them was as strong as ever. Despite the time that had passed since they last saw each other, nothing had changed between them. If anything, their connection had only grown stronger. The way they slipped back into their old rhythm, sharing stories and encouraging each other, was a testament to the depth of their relationship. Lopez listened intently as Samuel recounted his experiences, offering advice where he could and simply providing a listening ear where he couldn't. The older man had always been a source of wisdom and comfort for Samuel, and today was no different. As they sat there, it struck Samuel just how much Uncle Lopez had done for him, how much he had given without ever expecting anything in return. "You know," Samuel said after a while, his voice growing a bit more serious, "I don't think I would have made it this far without you, Uncle Lopez. You were there for me when no one else was, and I can't thank you enough for that." Lopez looked at him, his eyes softening. "Samuel, you were just a boy who needed help, and I did what anyone would have done. I'm just glad to see you doing so well now. You've grown into a fine young man, and that's all the thanks I need." But Samuel wasn't content with that. "No, Uncle," he insisted. "You went above and beyond for me. You gave me a place to stay, food to eat, and most importantly, you gave me hope when I had none. I don't know where I'd be today if it weren't for you." Lopez reached across the table and placed a hand on Samuel's. "And look at you now," he said with a smile. "You're doing great things, and you've got a bright future ahead of you. That's all I ever wanted for you." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them reflecting on how far Samuel had come since those early days of struggle. Lopez had watched Samuel grow from a scared, homeless boy into a confident, determined young man, and it filled him with a sense of pride that words could hardly express. Eventually, the conversation lightened again, and they spent the next hour catching up on all the little things that had happened in their lives since they last saw each other. Lopez shared stories from the supermarket, funny encounters with customers, and the daily routine that kept him busy. Samuel, in turn, talked about his school projects, his friends, and the hobbies he had picked up along the way. By the time they finished their coffee, it was clear that neither of them wanted the visit to end, but they both knew that life would soon call them back to their respective duties. Samuel had homework to finish and exams to prepare for, and Lopez had more shelves to stock and customers to assist. But before they parted ways, Lopez offered Samuel a few final words of encouragement. "Remember, Samuel," he said, "no matter how tough things get, you've got people who care about you. You've got me, you've got Alfred, and you've got your friends. Don't ever forget that you're not alone." Samuel nodded, feeling a renewed sense of strength and determination. "I won't forget, Uncle. Thank you for everything." With that, they embraced once more, and Samuel made his way out of the supermarket, the warmth of the visit lingering in his heart long after he left. As he walked back to the mansion, he felt lighter, more focused, and ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. For Samuel, the visit to Uncle Lopez had been more than just a break from his studies. It had been a reminder of where he had come from, of the struggles he had faced and overcome, and of the people who had helped him along the way. It reinforced his resolve to succeed, not just for himself, but for everyone who had believed in him and supported him. And as he continued on his path, Samuel knew that no matter how difficult things might get, he would always have a place to return to, a place where he was loved and appreciated, a place where he could find warmth, comfort, and the unwavering support of an uncle who had become so much more than just a stranger who had once offered him a meal. Years passed, and Alfred watched with growing pride as Samuel transformed from a young boy with a troubled past into a dedicated student with a bright future. The challenges Samuel faced were formidable, but he tackled them head-on, driven by an unwavering determination to succeed. Samuel's journey through high school was marked by hard work and perseverance. He studied tirelessly, often late into the night, fueled by the desire to make the most of the opportunities that had been given to him. His dedication didn't go unnoticed. Teachers praised his commitment, and Alfred, ever the supportive uncle, made sure to encourage Samuel at every step. The bond between them deepened with each passing year, as Alfred saw in Samuel the same determination that had driven him in his own youth. Alfred's pride knew no bounds when Samuel graduated high school with flying colors. The day of the graduation ceremony was filled with emotions. As Samuel walked across the stage to receive his diploma, Alfred couldn't help but reflect on how far the boy had come. From a young boy with no home and no hope, Samuel had risen to become a top student, admired by his peers and teachers alike. Alfred's heart swelled with pride as he watched Samuel receive his diploma, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. But this was just the beginning. Samuel's academic achievements in high school opened the doors to a prestigious university, where he pursued a degree in mechanical engineering. It was a challenging field, one that required not just intelligence but also creativity and a deep understanding of complex systems. Samuel, however, was undaunted. He threw himself into his studies with the same determination that had carried him through high school, determined to succeed. University life presented its own set of challenges. The coursework was rigorous, the expectations high, and the competition fierce. But Samuel thrived in this environment. He spent long hours in the library, poring over textbooks and working on projects. He sought help when he needed it, never hesitating to ask questions or seek guidance from his professors. His dedication to his studies was unwavering, and it soon became clear that Samuel was not just an ordinary student. He was exceptional. Over the years, Samuel's hard work paid off. He excelled in his courses, earning top grades and the respect of his professors. His projects were innovative, his ideas groundbreaking, and his commitment to his field undeniable. He became known not just for his academic achievements but also for his character. Humble, hardworking, and always willing to help others. Samuel was the kind of student every professor hoped for, and his peers admired him for his dedication and kindness. The years flew by, and soon it was time for Samuel's university graduation. The day of the ceremony was one of joy and celebration. Alfred, along with his wife Clara, daughter Sarah, son Jeremy, Jamie, and Uncle Lopez, all made the journey to the university to support Samuel on this momentous day. Each of them had played a significant role in Samuel's life, and each of them was eager to share in his success. The graduation ceremony was held in a grand auditorium, filled with students dressed in caps and gowns, their faces alight with the anticipation of what the future held. As the names of the graduates were called, the audience clapped and cheered, each name a testament to years of hard work and determination. When Samuel's name was called, the entire group rose to their feet, clapping and cheering louder than anyone else in the auditorium. As Samuel walked across the stage, he was met with the proud smiles of his professors and the thunderous applause of the audience. He accepted his degree with grace, shaking hands with the university president and posing for photos. But his eyes searched the crowd for the faces that mattered most, his family. As Samuel looked out into the sea of faces, he spotted them immediately. Alfred and Clara, standing side by side, beaming with pride. Sarah, her eyes shining with tears of happiness, waved enthusiastically. Jeremy, who had always been a steady source of support, gave him a thumbs up. Jamie, his friend and confidant, stood tall, a look of pride on his face. And there, in the midst of them all, was Uncle Lopez, his weathered face alight with joy. The moment Samuel stepped off the stage, he was enveloped in a sea of hugs and congratulations. Alfred was the first to embrace him, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Samuel," he said, holding him tightly. "You've worked so hard, and you deserve every bit of this success." Clara was next, her eyes filled with tears as she kissed Samuel on the cheek. "We always knew you could do it," she said, her voice trembling with pride. "You've made us all so proud." Sarah and Jeremy were right behind her, each taking turns to hug Samuel and congratulate him. "You're amazing, Samuel," Sarah exclaimed, wiping away her tears. "You've accomplished so much, and I know you're going to do even greater things in the future." Jeremy, always the quieter of the two, simply gave Samuel a firm handshake and a pat on the back. "You did it, man," he said with a smile. "We're all really proud of you." Then came Jamie, who had been by Samuel's side through thick and thin. The two friends shared a look of understanding and respect. "I knew you had it in you," Jamie said, pulling Samuel into a hug. "You've come so far, and I'm proud to call you my friend." Finally, it was Uncle Lopez's turn. The old man's eyes were filled with tears as he approached Samuel, holding out his arms. "You've grown into such a fine young man," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I always knew you were special, Samuel. You've made us all so proud." Samuel hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by the love and support of the people around him. "I couldn't have done it without you, Uncle," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were there for me when no one else was, and I'll never forget that." They stood together for a moment, the weight of the years and the significance of the day settling over them. It was a moment of triumph, of joy, and of deep gratitude. Samuel had come so far from the scared, hungry boy he had once been, and it was all thanks to the people who had believed in him, who had supported him, and who had loved him unconditionally. After the ceremony, the group gathered outside the auditorium for photos. They posed together, laughing and joking as the camera captured the moment. Samuel stood in the center, holding his degree, surrounded by the people who had become his family. The joy in their faces was palpable, a reflection of the pride they all felt for Samuel's achievements. As the evening wore on, they made their way to a nearby restaurant for a celebratory dinner. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the sounds of clinking glasses, laughter, and the sharing of stories. Alfred proposed a toast, raising his glass high. "To Samuel," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you've achieved more than we ever could have imagined. Here's to your bright future and to all the incredible things you're going to do." The glasses clinked, and everyone took a sip, their eyes shining with pride and joy. Samuel, sitting at the head of the table, couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the love and support that surrounded him. He knew that he was incredibly lucky to have these people in his life, and he was determined to make the most of the opportunities that lay ahead. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to the future. Samuel spoke about his plans, his dreams, and the goals he had set for himself. Alfred listened intently, offering advice and encouragement, while the others chimed in with their own thoughts and ideas. It was a night filled with hope, with the promise of a bright future, and with the unbreakable bonds of family. When the evening finally came to an end, Samuel found himself standing outside the restaurant, looking up at the stars. The city buzzed with life around him, but in that moment, all he could think about was how far he had come and how much further he still had to go. But this time, he knew he wasn't alone. He had the love and support of a family that had taken him in, believed in him, and helped him become the person he was today. As they said their goodbyes, each person hugging Samuel tightly and offering words of encouragement, Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. He knew that he was standing on the shoulders of giants, people who had lifted him up when he was down and who had never given up on him, even when things seemed impossible. In the weeks and months that followed, Samuel threw himself into the next chapter of his life with the same determination that had carried him through high school and university. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to face them head-on, armed with the knowledge, skills, and love that had been given to him. Alfred continued to be a guiding force in Samuel's life, offering wisdom and support whenever it was needed. Jamie remained a close friend, always there to lend a helping hand or a listening ear. And Uncle Lopez, though growing older, continued to be a source of comfort and strength, his unwavering belief in Samuel's potential never wavering. Samuel's journey was far from over, but as he looked toward the future, he knew that whatever came his way, he would face it with the same resilience and determination that had brought him this far. Surrounded by the love of his family, he was ready to take on the world. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of the story. If you felt the tension, the emotion, and the twist of this tale, then I have done my job right. This kind of story reminds us the power dynamic that exists in our world and how sometimes the unexpected happen when least expected. If you enjoy this, please don't forget to hit the like button, share your thought in the comment, and of course subscribe to the channel for more stories that dig deep into the human experiences. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired. I'll see you in the next video.